Hey, we're Saints. Father Chris and Deacon Greg here. Glad to have you, beautiful people, with us. Welcome to our crucifixion live stream. We are glad to be back with you. It's been fun, this whole new format. I don't know. I kind of like it. Seems like it's fun. It's being well received. We thank you for that.
I like it too.
I like that you like it. So I want to share with you, we had a great conversation amongst our team here, and a text message came out that someone was bracing themselves for 3 hours of entertaining, unhinged mayhem. We decided we might create our own unhinged mayhem.
I think it's a way better podcast than Greg in the Kitchen, if I'm being honest. Which, if you don't know about Greg in the Kitchen, that's smart.
It's glorious.
It's better for them if they don't know about
What
it.
Greg in the Kitchen. All right, so let's get after it. We've been having conversations as of late. It's fascinating to me that many people have been saying that they want to reject the Old Testament. And I don't think it's that they're being like Marcionites, right? For those who may not be familiar, there was a heretic in the early centuries of the church named Marcion, and he rejected the Old Testament, saying it was a different God than the God of the Father of Jesus Christ in the New. So, Marcion only took a few letters of Paul and only the Gospel of Luke, and throughout the rest. The church condemned this. So I don't think these people are saying that per se, but they have a hard time because they have minds, and they struggle with things like, what are you talking about? The world created 7 days, 10,000 years ago. What are you talking about? 8 people surviving this massive flood that wipes out the whole world, and they repopulate everything. And why is God so rotten in that when he takes Joshua into the promised land and he kills all these people? Why would he, if he's a loving God, why would he kill all these people? What's going on? And Goliath, I always love that one. He's like 8 feet tall. Nobody's been 8 feet tall. Not even Yao Ming was 8 feet tall. He was only 7'1" or whatever, 7'4", whatever it was. Like, what are you talking about, right? And so they struggle with it. I even heard someone say to me, he's a reader and a thinker, that he is going to, I forgot the word he used, but basically ignore the Old Testament. He's done with it.
Huh. I think that's fascinating. Because, I mean, if you really read and dive into the Old Testament, and I'll be honest, I didn't always read the Old Testament. Like, I find a lot of the Old Testament to be boring. I find a lot of the Old Testament to be more confusing than other parts of Scripture. It's kind of weird. I don't always know what it is. It kind of feels like it's supposed to be somewhat of a history book. The way that it's always presented to us, like in Sunday schools and in different places, is that it's the history of the people of Israel. And it's just, it's confusing. And then there's all those sections that you get into, like Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Numbers, that are really just, they're there and they almost feel like they're filler. You get into the Psalms, you get into Proverbs, you get into so many of the different prophets, and there's just so much different stuff in there. Obviously, a lot of it we read in church, and so I'm familiar with those things. But what's really going on with that whole thing? Because it is confusing,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it does seem like God's different in part A and then part B, right? Like, and we look at them as two completely separate things. We also learn how to talk. But it's just a bizarre conglomeration of things, and I would love for you to explain what's going on.
All right. Your sentiments were expressed perfectly for so many of us. You and I both have heard intimidating, right? When talking about Scripture, or I don't understand it, or I get lost, all of those things. And I think it starts so let's spend some time. Let's go through this stuff because it's beautiful. I mean, it really is. The Scriptures are it's the most amazing book, hands down, par excellence. I mean, I forget the numbers because I'll get them wrong, but Harry Potter has sold more copies of books than any other ever. I think, like, whatever the number is, 100 million. I don't know what the actual number is. And yet Harry Potter is not even close to selling as many copies of Scripture. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Scripture is by far the most sold book ever, like by 1 billion or whatever the numbers really are, but it's exorbitantly, far ahead. That's because I think it's the most incredible book. The problem that many people face when they find it intimidating or when they struggle with it is the manner in which they read it, the approach they take to scripture, right? And so I think you opened the door wonderfully in something you just said a minute ago, and I'm not going to repeat it, so we'll kind of like play a surprise game. But one approach is to reading things is in the sense of meaning, right?
Mhm.
So you're familiar with Aesop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the most famous of all his stories is The Tortoise and the Hare.
Yep.
Tell us about it. I mean, just because, like, lay it out there so that, I'm sure everybody knows. And if they do, forgive me for repeating it. But
Yeah.
what's the story?
I mean, there's a tortoise, there's a hare, there's a race. The hare is fast, the tortoise is slow. The hare runs faster than the tortoise. And then as he is going, he knows that he has such an exorbitant lead. And then he just takes a nap. And as he's asleep, the tortoise, slow and steady, ends up winning the race. And that's how the story ends.
So, yes, I know. That's correct. Very well told. What's the point of that story?
Well, I mean, the point of it is that you just keep grinding, you keep going, you never rest on your laurels, you never sit back and relax. You just
Yeah.
keep going through things.
So there's a meaning there. And who really are the tortoise and the hare? Who do they stand for?
I think they stand for you and I.
Yeah.
Because you're much faster than I am.
Yeah. Yes. I do need a nap so desperately. But I think you eloquate it perfectly. Like, look, it's a story that has a meaning, and there is no real tortoise and real rabbit that were in a race. They are stand-ins for you and I, people who read the stories in order to learn the point that Aesop is trying to make, that the author's trying to make. All right. So conversely, there is another way to read. And this is what you mentioned earlier, historically. So if let's say I want to learn about the Battle of Gettysburg, something about the Civil War, right? Gettysburg just pops in the head. How am I gonna glean any information about that? I mean, I'd go to the library, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to go to the library, you're going to get a book. I mean, when I was a kid, we actually went to Gettysburg.
Yes.
We saw the whole field of battle. We toured all the sites. We did a driving tour where they gave you a cassette tape to put in the car and listen to what was going on as they narrated where you were and what you were seeing. And then, I mean, I was very excited about Gettysburg. So I bought books at the gift shop and learned as much as I could about the Gettysburg.
Yeah.
The Battle of Gettysburg, the Gettysburg Address, all of the different things.
Totally. I mean, from what I understand, I've not been in many, many years. I was a kid too when I went. That they actually do like a reenactment. They have a play with actors that come out and reenact the battle. I think that's in Gettysburg. Anyways, it's what you're saying is exactly what it is. I mean, you're reading a book to get facts about individual characters that were present. Even studying Gettysburg goes beyond just that battle, because Lincoln comes into play because of the address. Grant as one general in one army and Lee in the other, even though, it's like my point in saying about Generals Grant and Lee is that the whole Civil War and all of it that comes into play now factors in, even though there are certain people that weren't in the Battle of Gettysburg. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln wasn't in the battle, but he gave his famous address there, right? And so, excuse me, we're learning dates and times and places. We learn about the actual battle plans and what happened, who won, why, and all that kind of stuff. This is an historical reading of, we would read a book about an historical fact. We can even go to this historical place and see, and as I said, it's reenacted for us. In that type of approach, it's about data, it's about fact, it's about what really is. We might be able to learn the meaning of proper battle plans and why you could win that battle versus lose that battle, right? But the point of the historical writing, the historical account, is to tell you data, factual events and occurrences, right?
Yeah.
All right. So if those are two different ways to approach. One is approach reading something with the idea on finding the meaning and finding what the author is intending to say, versus finding factual historical events, personifying characters and historicizing events and dates.
Yeah.
All right.
That makes sense.
The question then is, which way if those are two approaches, do we approach Scripture? Now, I realize that there are some out there who are going to say, oh, Father Chris, there are other ways to approach Scripture. Yeah, fine. But let's be honest. Most people, including many theologies, approach Scripture in the second manner, meaning historically. They're reading it as data. I am of the opinion that it is absolutely the most inappropriate way to approach Scripture. That to understand what's happening in Scripture, we must approach in the same way that we would approach Aesop's fable, right? So and we're going to go through some really hardcore examples in the next little bit to explain what we mean by that. But I really, because we come across so many, and people criticize, let's say like this, my mind's racing, but people will critique the Christian faith. You're saying that God created the earth in 7 days and 10,000 years ago. And I always giggle at that, but there are people out there who actually literally believe that, right? They also probably believe the earth is flat. So whatever. I mean, what are you going to do with that kind of stuff? But that's a critique out there. And like we said earlier, like there's no Goliath 8 foot, 9 foot tall. I mean, nobody's ever been that big. There are in Scripture, the Nephilim, these giants, right? Well, where are the giants? You know what I mean? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, we haven't found their bones. I mean, all of these criticisms, because in trying to find actual historical data in the way that you read about the Battle of Gettysburg from Scripture, you're missing the reason and the point and the manner in which the scriptural authors wrote. Aesop wrote with an eye on teaching a lesson about slow and steady wins the race. He didn't write a story about a rabbit and a hare that you're going to go find.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The author of a history book on the Gettysburg Address, sorry, I keep saying that, the Battle of Gettysburg or the address, either way, they wrote with an intent on telling you this happened on this day with this person in this place. Scripture is written from the first perspective, right? It's not to say that there wasn't a place or a time or people involved, but the point and the manner with which Scripture was written was like Aesop's fable. It's trying to tell you something. Now, we're going to talk about what that something it's telling us is, but that's the point, the approach.
Yeah. No, I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's put things into category. Let me rephrase. It puts things into a different light than what we're prone to do. It'd be like reading about the Gettysburg Address and the Battle of Gettysburg, getting really excited about Abraham Lincoln, going down a rabbit hole where then you start getting into the conspiracy theories with all of the interplay between Lincoln and Kennedy and all of the stuff that goes on between them. And then you go even further down that rabbit hole. And then you start watching the movies that they write about these men. And you then all of a sudden think that Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is a true story. You've never seen Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
I was just going to say, I don't understand all of the words that came out. But apparently there's a movie about Abraham Lincoln who hunts vampires.
Yeah. Yeah. Really? But it's not inspired by a true story.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not the same thing. At the same time, there are things within Scripture that kind of point us to thinking that way, where it might be confusing at times, like why some of the data that is included in Scripture that seems to be actual data, like in Isaiah chapter 6, it starts with the phrase, in the year that King Uzziah died. Is that to put context into when Isaiah is writing, or is that, just a fact to say like this happened?
I mean, yes. So it's a good question. Some interpreters are going to say that it is to historicize it. I even took a class on the Gospel of John in seminary where the author of the Gospel of John is pretty specific about, places and dates and times. And
the number of fish that were hauled in is like weird.
153, right? Like, the professor in that class was saying this was to prove that, the factual events and that John was physically there and so on. So some people approach it that way. I'm still going to just drive to the fact that those are things that are all setting context, perhaps, and also giving meaning, right? So to wrap all of this preamble up, and then maybe we can get into some real examples. Maybe we'll start literally in Genesis 1 at the beginning. And let's wrap it up by saying, my opinion is that we should approach scripture from the same perspective that we would approach Aesop's fables, and that is that we are looking to hear what God is intending to say. What does he mean with all of this stuff? God is not writing a historical text the way that there's a history book about the Battle of Gettysburg. He's got something he wants to say. And our job, our duty is to try to find out what it is he intends to say. All right, great stuff.
I think that's awesome. It's a good understanding of how to read scripture and place it within its proper context, so then we can move on into the specifics and look at what's actually going on.
Yeah, totally. And people are going to disagree with my approach. Fine. I mean, that's fine. There have been, far better, smarter, faster, wiser men and women throughout the histories than myself. I'm just telling you what I think, and I'm going to do my best to prove that I'm correct in my approach by the text itself. I mean, that's the whole point. Hey, Warrior Saints, thank you so much for being with us. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps us get the word out there. And if you want more, visit us at warriorsaints.org and subscribe to Understanding the Bible. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.